This is probably gonna sound fake as hell, but I swear on my mom's life this actually happened. I'm 17 and live in rural Iowa, about an hour south of Des Moines. My friends think I'm being dramatic, but they were all there and saw the same thing I did. So last Saturday night, me and 4 of my buddies decided to have a little bonfire in this field behind my friend Jake's house. His parents were out of town and we figured we'd drink some beers, smoke a little weed, typical weekend stuff. The field is like 100 acres of corn that got harvested a few weeks ago, so it's just stubble now with some random patches of trees scattered around the edges. We got the fire going around 9 p.m., and everything was totally normal at first. Mason brought a speaker and we were playing music, talking about girls from school. You know, just chilling. The fire was going pretty good and we had a decent pile of wood Jake's dad had left behind his barn. Around 10:30, maybe 11, I started smelling something weird. At first I thought maybe someone had stepped in dog shit or something, but it kept getting stronger. It was like, imagine a wet dog that's been rolling around in garbage for a week, mixed with that smell you get when something dies under your porch in the summer. Really musky and rotten, but also kind of wild, like a zoo smell but worse. I asked if anyone else could smell it and they all could. Tyler said maybe there was a dead deer somewhere nearby, but the smell was getting stronger, not weaker like it would if we were just catching it on the wind. It was thick enough that it was cutting right through the wood smoke from our fire, which is saying something because we had oak burning. That's when Garrett pointed toward the tree line on the far side of the field and said, "What the hell is that?" There was something moving along the edge of the trees, maybe 200 yards away. It was hard to see because it was staying in the shadows, but whatever it was big. Way too big to be a dog or coyote. At first I thought maybe it was a deer, but the way it moved wasn't right. It was staying low to the ground and moving in this weird stalking pattern, like it was hunting something. Probably just a deer, Mason said, but his voice had that tone like when you're trying to convince yourself of something you don't really believe. We kept watching it, and that's when we realized it was running on 4 legs, but not like any animal I've ever seen. The front legs seemed longer than they should be, and the whole thing moved with this fluid, almost human-like intelligence. Like it knew we were watching and was deliberately staying just far enough away that we couldn't get a good look. The smell was getting worse too. It was making my eyes water, and Tyler actually puked, though he claimed it was because he'd been drinking. But I saw his face when he first caught a whiff of that stench, and it wasn't the beer that made him sick. "Guys, I think we should go," Jake said. Jake's not the type to get spooked easily. He's the one who usually talks us into doing stupid stuff. So when he said that, we all knew something was seriously wrong. We started packing up our stuff, trying to act casual, but moving faster than normal. The thing at the tree line had stopped moving and was watching us now. I couldn't make out details in the dark, but I could see this shape that was too big and the wrong proportions to be any normal animal. As we were putting out the fire, Connor grabbed my arm and whispered, "It's moving closer." He was right. Whatever it was had left the tree line and was coming toward us across the field. Not running, but the steady walk that was somehow more terrifying than if it had been charging at us. The smell was getting so strong I could taste it in the back of my throat. We threw our things in Jake's truck and got the hell out of there. Jake was driving like a maniac down the dirt road that runs along the edge of the field, doing probably 50, and that's when our headlights swept across it. We were maybe 30 yards away when Jake took a sharp right turn, and the headlight beam cut across this thing standing in the middle of the road. For maybe 2 seconds, we got a perfect view of it, and I will never forget what I saw. It was standing on two legs like a person, but it was at least 7 feet tall, maybe 8, covered in dark fur that looked almost black in the headlights. The body was massively muscled like a bodybuilder, but the proportions were wrong. The arms hung down almost to its knees and ended in hands that looked human, except for claws that had to be 3 inches long. But the head was the worst part. It was like someone had taken a German shepherd's head and stretched it out, made it bigger, more wolf-like but with human intelligence in the eyes. The snout was long and full of teeth that reflected our headlights like knives. And those eyes, they were yellow, but not animal yellow. There was something behind them that understood what it was looking at. When our lights hit it, the thing turned its head toward us, and I saw recognition in those eyes, like it knew we were the same kids from the field. The whole sighting lasted maybe 3 seconds before it bounded off into the corn stubble, faster than anything that big should be able to move. I'm talking gazelle fast, but this thing had to weigh 300 pounds easy. It covered 50 yards in what felt like 2 steps and disappeared into the darkness. We drove to Casey's and sat in the parking lot under the lights for an hour before anyone said anything. When we finally started talking, we all described the exact same thing. Same height, same build, same terrifying face. Connor was shaking so bad he couldn't hold his Mountain Dew. I've been researching online ever since, and everything I find points to something called a Dogman. Apparently there have been sightings all over the Midwest, but I never paid attention to any of that cryptid stuff before. Now I can't stop reading about it. The weird part is, I found a newspaper article from 1987 about livestock killings in our exact area. 12 cattle found dead over a 2-week period, all torn apart by something the sheriff said was unlike any predator native to Iowa. The killing stopped as suddenly as they started, and they never found what did it. I haven't been sleeping great since it happened. I keep thinking about those eyes and how it looked at us like it was memorizing our faces. Part of me wants to go back with better lights and a camera, but a bigger part of me never wants to see that thing again. My dad has a trail cam I could probably borrow, but I'm honestly scared of what it might capture. I know this sounds insane, and I know most people won't believe it, but I needed to tell someone. Has anyone else in Iowa ever seen anything like this? I can't be the only one. I'm 47 years old, and I've lived in Southern Illinois my entire life. I'm not someone who believes in ghosts or monsters or any of that nonsense. I'm a practical person. I work as a medical receptionist, raised 3 kids mostly on my own, and I've always prided myself on having both feet firmly planted in reality, which is why what happened Tuesday night has me so shaken up. I live in Ridgeway Apartments on the outskirts of Fairfield. It's not the nicest place, but it's affordable and quiet. Most of the residents are older folks or young families just starting out. The complex sits right where the town ends and the farmland begins, so we get our share of wildlife: deer, raccoons, and the occasional coyote. Nothing I haven't seen before. Tuesday night, I was getting home late from my book club. We'd been discussing some romance novel that went way longer than it should have, and it was nearly 11 p.m. by the time I pulled into the parking lot. Most of the apartments were dark, except for porch lights and the occasional TV glow through the curtains. I parked in my usual spot near the back of the complex, close to the maintenance shed. There are only 4 units back there, and mine is the corner one, so it's usually pretty quiet. I was gathering my purse and the leftover brownies Linda had insisted I take home when I heard the sound. At first, I thought it was someone's cat in distress. You know, that yowling sound they make when they're hurt or scared. But as I listened, it didn't sound quite right. Too low and guttural, and there was something almost human about it. Like someone trying to scream, but their throat was damaged. I looked around but didn't see anything, so I figured maybe it was coming from one of the apartments. Mrs. Patterson in 12B has been having health issues lately. I grabbed my keys and started walking toward my door, but that's when I saw it. There was something crouched behind the dumpster near the maintenance shed. In the dim light from the parking lot lamps, I could make out a shape that was all wrong. It was about the size of a medium dog, but the proportions were completely off. Too tall and angular, like someone had tried to build an animal from memory and gotten all the details mixed up. It was perfectly still, and at first I thought maybe it was just an oddly shaped pile of trash that had fallen behind the dumpster. But then it moved slightly, and I realized it was watching me. I stopped walking and we just stared at each other for what felt like forever, but was probably only 10 or 15 seconds. The thing was balanced in this weird way, like it wasn't quite comfortable with how its body was put together. And those sounds I'd been hearing, they were coming from it. The parking lot light was flickering. It's been on the fritz for weeks, and maintenance keeps saying they'll fix it. So I was only getting glimpses. But what I could see made my skin crawl. It looked like it was covered in sparse patchy fur or hair. And there were these pale areas that might have been skin showing through. The overall color was hard to determine, somewhere between gray and that sickly pink you see on hairless cats. The worst part was the eyes. Even in the poor lighting, they seemed to catch and reflect what little illumination there was. Not like a normal animal's eyes, but brighter and more intense. And they were huge, way too big for whatever kind of head this thing had. I fumbled for my phone to turn on the flashlight, and that slight movement must have startled it, because it made the sound I can only describe as a cross between a hiss and a growl. Not like any animal I've ever heard before. Then it moved. I've never seen anything move like that. It didn't run or walk. It sort of hopped, or maybe bounced, like it was moving on springs, covering distance in these weird, uneven bounds that took it from behind the dumpster to the tree line at the edge of the property, in maybe 3 or 4 movements. By the time I got my flashlight on, it was gone. I stood there in the parking lot for another 5 minutes, shining my phone light around and listening, but I didn't see or hear anything else. I practically ran to my apartment and locked the door behind me. I didn't sleep much that night. Every little sound had me checking the windows, and I kept thinking about those eyes and the way the thing had moved. It was like watching something that was trying to pretend to be an animal, but couldn't quite get it right. The next morning, I walked over to the dumpster area to see if there were any tracks or signs that I'd actually seen something and not just imagined it. The ground was too hard to show any footprints, but I did find some scratches on the side of the dumpster. Deep gouges in the metal, like something with serious claws had been climbing on it. I asked around to see if anyone else had seen anything unusual, but most people just gave me that look you get when they think you're losing it. The maintenance guy, Dave, said he'd noticed the cats in the area have been acting weird lately, hiding and not coming around for scraps like they usually do. I've lived in this area my whole life, and I've never seen anything like what I saw Tuesday night. I keep telling myself it was probably just a sick animal, maybe a dog with mange or some kind of deformity, but I can't shake the feeling that what I saw wasn't natural. I've been parking closer to the front of the complex ever since. I've been hiking solo in Michigan's forests for 8 years, and I've never experienced anything like what happened yesterday. I'm still trying to process it, and honestly debating whether I should ever go out alone again. had plans to hike a section of the North County Trail near Baldwin with two of my girlfriends, but they both bailed last minute. One had to work and the other got sick. I almost canceled too, but I'd been looking forward to this hike all week, and the weather was perfect. October in Michigan is my favorite time to be in the woods, with all the fall colors and that crisp air that makes you feel alive. I've hiked this particular trail dozens of times. It's about a 6-mile loop through mixed hardwood forests, with some really beautiful overlooks. I know it like the back of my hand, which is why what happened felt so unsettling. This was my safe space, my sanctuary, and something violated that. I started the hike around 10 a.m., planning to take my time and maybe do some photography. The trail was gorgeous. Maples turning bright red, oak leaves that golden brown color I love, carpet of fallen leaves crunching under my boots. For the first hour and a half, everything was perfect. I saw a few other hikers heading back toward the parking area. But after that, I had the trail to myself. That's when things started to feel wrong. It began as just this nagging sense that I wasn't alone anymore. You know, that feeling when someone's watching you, that prickle on the back of your neck. I kept turning around to check behind me, expecting to see another hiker coming up the trail, but there was never anyone there. At first, I chalked it up to just being nervous about hiking alone. My mom has been on my case about it lately, always sending me articles about women who disappear in national forests. But I've been doing this for years and I'm careful. I always tell people where I'm going, carry a GPS, and have my bear spray and whistle. But the feeling kept getting stronger. Not the usual alertness you get when you're alone in the woods, but something much more intense, like being studied by something with hostile intentions. I stopped at the 2-mile mark to drink some water and really listen to the forest around me. That's when I noticed how quiet it had gotten. There were no birds or squirrels chattering, not even insects buzzing. Just a dead silence except for the wind through the leaves. In 8 years of hiking, I've learned that when the forest goes completely quiet, there's usually a predator nearby. I pulled out my bear spray and clipped it to my belt where I could reach it quickly. Michigan doesn't have grizzlies, but we do have black bears. And while they're usually not aggressive, I wasn't taking any chances with how weird I was feeling. The oppressive sensation got worse as I continued hiking. It felt like something was pacing me, staying just out of sight but matching my speed. I kept stopping and turning around, scanning the trees, but I never saw anything. Just that overwhelming sense of being hunted. I've had panic attacks before, started getting them after my divorce 3 years ago, and I know what they feel like. The racing heart, the shortness of breath, that sense of impending doom. This felt similar but different. My body was reacting to something real, not just my anxiety playing tricks on me. Every instinct I had was screaming that I needed to get out of there. At the 3-mile mark, I made the decision to turn around. I've never cut a hike short before because of nerves, but something was seriously wrong. The feeling of being watched had intensified to the point where I was constantly looking over my shoulder, and my hands were shaking as I tried to take photos. I picked up my pace heading back, not quite jogging, but walking much faster than normal. That's when I got my first actual glimpse of whatever had been following me. I was maybe 1.5 miles from the parking area when I caught movement in my peripheral vision. Something large had darted between 2 oak trees about 50 yards off the trail to my right. It was there and gone so fast, I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. But the image burned into my brain was unlike anything I'd ever seen. The best way I can describe it is a dog in the shape of a man. It was moving on 2 legs, upright like a person, but the proportions were off. It was too tall and too muscular through the chest and shoulders, with arms that hung down further than they should have, and it was covered in dark fur or hair. What struck me most was how quietly it moved. Something that size crashing through the underbrush should have made noise, broken branches, rustled leaves. But it was almost silent, like it knew exactly how to move through the forest without disturbing anything. I didn't run. Some part of my brain was still rational enough to know that running might trigger a chase response. But I definitely picked up the pace. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears, and I kept my hand on the bear spray. Over the next half mile, I caught 2 more glimpses of it, once crossing the trail behind me, maybe 100 yards back, and once moving parallel to the trail on the left side. Each time it was there for just a split second before disappearing into the trees. But each sighting confirmed what I'd seen the first time. By the time I could see my car through the trees, I was practically power walking. I fumbled with my keys. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped them twice, but finally got the door unlocked and threw myself into the driver's seat. I sat there for a minute with the doors locked, engine running, trying to calm down and convince myself I'd overreacted. But as I was putting the car in reverse, I saw something step out from behind a large pine tree at the edge of the parking lot. It was maybe 60 feet away, and for the first time, I got a clear look at it in the daylight. Definitely bipedal, definitely covered in dark brownish fur, and definitely not human despite walking upright. The head was elongated like a dog's but larger, and even from that distance I could see intelligence in its posture and the way it was studying my car. We looked at each other for maybe 5 seconds before it stepped back behind the tree and vanished. I didn't wait to see if it would reappear. I drove home doing 70 on back roads that are posted for 45, checking my rearview mirror the entire time. I'm supposed to go camping up near Traverse City next weekend with some friends, but I'm honestly not sure I can handle being in the woods right now. The rational part of my brain keeps trying to come up with explanations. Maybe a person in a costume, maybe a bear walking upright. Maybe my anxiety just made me see things that weren't there. But I know what I saw, and I know it was tracking me through those woods for miles. I'm a junior at a small liberal arts college in Northern California, and something happened last night that's been messing with me all day. I keep going back and forth on whether I should even post this, because it sounds crazy, but I need to tell someone. I was walking back to my dorm around 1:30 a.m. after a party at one of the off-campus houses. Yeah, I'd been drinking, but I wasn't drunk or anything. Maybe 3 beers over 4 hours. I was definitely sober enough to walk straight and remember everything clearly. Instead of taking the main path back to my dorm, I decided to cut through the academic quad to save a few minutes. It's something I do all the time, even late at night. Our campus is pretty safe and well lit, so I've never felt weird about walking alone after dark. I was passing behind the science building when I saw something that made me stop dead in my tracks. There was this pale shape crouched next to the dumpsters behind the chemistry lab, maybe 30 feet away from me. At first I thought it was just someone who'd had too much to drink and was puking or something, but it looked weird. The thing was way too thin, almost skeletal, and it was positioned in this odd crouch that didn't look human. Its back was curved in a way that seemed impossible, and its limbs looked too long for its body. The skin, and I could see it was skin, not clothing, was this sickly grayish white color that almost seemed to glow under the lights. I stood there frozen for maybe 10 seconds, just staring at this thing. It seemed to be focused on something in the dumpster, making these soft scraping sounds like it was digging through garbage. But the movements were wrong, too quick and jerky, like a stop-motion animation that's missing frames. Then it must have sensed me watching, because it went completely still. Slowly it turned its head toward me, and I got a glimpse of a face that I'm still having nightmares about. The features were sunken and sharp, with dark hollow spaces where the eyes should be. The mouth was too wide, and even from that distance, I could see it was hanging open slightly. We stared at each other for what felt like forever. I was too shocked to move or make a sound. The thing tilted its head at an angle that made my stomach turn, too far to one side, like an owl, but not quite. It didn't add up on something that was clearly meant to be more human-shaped. Just when I was starting to think about backing away slowly, I heard footsteps behind me and someone call out, "Hey, Marcus." It was Jenny from my sociology class. She'd apparently taken the same shortcut and had seen me standing there. The moment she spoke, that thing behind the dumpster moved faster than anything I've ever seen. It went from a crouch to gone in one fluid motion, disappearing around the corner of the building, so quickly I wasn't even sure which direction it had gone. "You okay?" Jenny asked as she walked up. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I turned to look where the thing had been, but there was nothing there. No sign that anything had ever been crouched by those dumpsters. Jenny followed my gaze, but obviously didn't see anything unusual. "Yeah, I'm fine," I told her. "I just thought I saw, I don't know, maybe a cat or something." We walked back to the dorms together, and she kept chatting about the party, but I was barely listening. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see that pale shape following us from the shadows. When I got back to my room, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the way it had moved, how unnatural everything about it seemed. This morning, I walked past the science building in daylight, and there's nothing unusual about the area behind it. Just normal dumpsters and a loading dock. I've been researching online and keep finding stories about something called the rake, or crawlers. The descriptions match what I saw: pale, thin, moves on all fours but can stand upright, feeds on garbage or worse things. Part of me is grateful Jenny showed up when she did, because I have no idea what would have happened if that thing had decided to come closer. But another part of me wishes I'd gotten a longer look, so I could be sure I wasn't just seeing things. I'm definitely taking the long way back to my dorm from now on. I never believed in any of this shit until 3 weeks ago. Now I'm sleeping with a loaded shotgun and considering moving back to Denver. I'm posting this because I need someone to tell me I'm losing my mind, or that there's a rational explanation for what's been happening. I live alone on 40 acres about an hour west of Colorado Springs, up in the Pike National Forest. Bought the place 2 years ago specifically to get away from people and city noise. The nearest neighbor is 3 miles down a dirt road, and it's been perfect until now. 3 weeks ago, I was coming back from a day hike on the Bar Trail. I'd stayed out later than planned, chasing some wild photography shots, and the sun was already setting when I started the drive home. Instead of taking the main forest road, I decided to cut through some back trails I'd explored before to try and shave off 20 minutes. About halfway through the drive, I saw firelight flickering through the trees. At first, I thought it was just other campers, but something felt wrong. The light was too orange, too intense, and it was completely silent. No voices, no crackling wood. I should have kept driving. Instead, I parked and grabbed my camera with the telephoto lens, thinking I might catch some interesting night photography. I crept through the trees toward the light, staying low and moving quiet like my dad taught me when we used to hunt. What I saw still makes my hands shake. There were 7 figures arranged in a circle around a massive bonfire. At first glance, they looked like people, but the proportions were not right. They were too tall, the arms were too long, and movements too fluid. They were wearing what looked like animal skins: wolf, bear, deer. But the skins seemed to move on their own, shifting and writhing like they were still alive. In the center of the circle was something that had been a deer. It was arranged in a way that made my stomach turn, surrounded by symbols drawn in what I really hope was mud, but looked dark and wet in the firelight. The figures were chanting in a language I'd never heard before, guttural and rhythmic, like nothing human should be able to make. As I watched, the one facing my direction, wearing what looked like a coyote pelt, began to change. I can't explain it properly. The skin seemed to meld with their body, the face elongating, limbs reshaping. It was like watching someone turn inside out, but worse. I must have made a sound because every single one of them stopped chanting and turned toward where I was hidden in perfect unison. The silence was deafening. That's all I could handle. I ran and crashed through the underbrush like a spooked elk. I didn't care about the noise. I just had to get back to my truck. I could hear them behind me, like animals moving fast through the forest, branches snapping, leaves rustling, but too quick and too coordinated. I made it to my truck and drove home, doing 80 on roads that barely handle 40. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I almost convinced myself it had been some kind of elaborate camping trip. Maybe people in costumes doing some weird role-playing thing. People are into all kind of strange hobbies these days. That wasn't until later when I saw the coyote. It was standing at the end of my driveway, maybe 50 yards from my front door, just watching the house. Nothing unusual about that. I see coyotes all the time out here. But this one was different. Bigger than normal, almost dog-sized, with yellow eyes that seemed too intelligent. And it was standing perfectly still, like a statue. I watched it through my kitchen window for 20 minutes. It never moved, never looked away from the house, never acted like a normal wild animal. When I stepped onto the porch, it tilted its head in a way that reminded me of a person trying to get a better look at something. I grabbed my binoculars for a closer look and nearly dropped them. The coyote's face was all messed up. The features were too symmetrical, almost human-like. And when it saw me looking at it through the binoculars, I swear to God it smiled. It was gone by the time I went inside to get my rifle. That was just the beginning. Over the next week, things started disappearing. Small stuff at first. A garden hose I'd left coiled by the back door. A pair of work gloves from the porch railing. My trail camera that had been mounted on a tree near the driveway. Then after that, bigger things started missing too. My spare tire vanished from the back of my truck overnight. A 20-pound bag of dog food I'd bought for the strays that sometimes wander through was gone from my storage shed, which was locked. I started finding tracks around the property, coyote prints, but wrong, too big, spaced too far apart. And sometimes they'd change mid-stride from animal to something that looked almost like a barefoot human print. The coyote, or whatever it was, kept showing up, always at dusk at the end of the driveway, doing nothing but watching. I tried taking pictures, but they never came out right. Either too dark, too blurry, or the thing just wouldn't show up on the camera at all. A week ago, I was chopping firewood behind the house when I heard my front door slam shut. The problem is I live alone, and I'd left through the back door. I walked around front and found muddy footprints on my porch. Human footprints, but with claw marks at the toe ends. Last night was the worst yet. I woke up around 3 a.m. to what sounded like someone walking around on my roof. Heavy footsteps pacing back and forth right above my bedroom. I grabbed my shotgun and a flashlight and went outside to check. There was nothing on the roof, no ladder, no way anyone could have gotten up there. But in the beam of my flashlight, I could see scratches in the metal sheeting. Deep gouges arranged in patterns that looked almost like the symbols I'd seen drawn around that deer in the forest. I was heading back inside when I heard my own voice calling my name from the tree line. My exact voice calling, "Hey, come over here. I found something." It was so perfect it made me question whether I was actually still asleep. The voice kept calling, getting more insistent, more urgent. "Come on, you need to see this. It's important." But I could see the trees where it was coming from, and there was a shape moving between them. Tall, wrong, covered in fur that shifted and moved in the moonlight. Ever since then, I haven't really slept. I sit in my kitchen with the shotgun across my lap and all the lights on, watching the tree line until dawn. The coyote is there every evening now, closer each night. Last night it was halfway up my driveway. I called the sheriff's department, but they think I'm some paranoid hermit losing his grip on reality. Maybe I am. Maybe living alone out here for 2 years has finally gotten to me. But I know what I saw in those woods, and I know something followed me home. You have been watching Neon Noir, a Radeon production brought to you by Trapper Dan, the finest in canned survival food.